Welcome to Uncredible. My name's Jeremy, and I'm Uncredible. This week, I want to let you know about what's happening on the Substack at uncredible.me. Uncredible.me. Two articles came out. On Wednesday, we had Me versus Me, and on Thursday, it's a throwback article called Pushing Through Pain. Both of those articles talk about dealing with struggles out on the runs. I've been doing long runs lately, and those articles will kind of walk you through some of the mental challenges that we face. Last week, I did an article called Excuse Factories, where I kind of talked about how I've become hyper aware of other people's excuses when I start talking about long distance running to them, or exercise, or fitness. There's always these excuses that come up, and I thought it would be appropriate to follow that up this week with this article, Me versus Me, where I discussed some of the excuses that I see in myself when I'm out on a run and I want to quit, or, even like right now, I'm doing a lot of winter running. I'll talk a little bit about that when we get to the weekly update. There's every day, so for me, I work night shift, which I talked about that last week in episode 2, and it's like between -4 and 10 degrees right now in where I live. And I come home from work at about 7 a.m. My kids go to school around 8, and then that's about the time that I should be getting out and going on my run. And I've really committed this winter to running outside as much as I can, but man, I don't talk about it in this article, but the excuses that I battle with, that I contend with to get myself out there and doing these runs, it's interesting. And I try in this particular article, Me versus Me, to just kind of reveal a little bit of those excuses. More on that, and on that article, I'm talking about when I'm on a long run and I want to quit. Let's say I've planned to do 10 miles and I get to 8. That kind of talks about where I'm battling within myself. Like, you don't have to go any further. You could pull a hamstring. It's going to hurt. All these thoughts go through your head. And the longer you run, the further distances that you run, you find that your body will get to that point where you want to quit. And when you push through it, there's another couple of miles before the next time it happens. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in our main topic, but a quick weekly update. So I'm recording these episodes on Fridays, and then I'm publishing them on Saturdays. So when I say that I'm in a week of marathon training, I'm usually towards the end of it. This would be like the 5th or 6th day of it. So I want to go back to last Saturday, which was my last long run. Now tomorrow, I'll be doing a long run for week 4. So technically this week I'm in week 4 of marathon training, but the end of last week would have been my long run for week 3. And I wanted to share a little bit about that because I ran 8 miles in -4 degree weather. It was brutal. And one of the things that happens to me is, so my end of my week is I go to work Thursday night. I come home Friday morning, and then I record this podcast, I do some editing, I'll take a brief nap on Fridays, and then Saturday, for whatever reason, I'll go to bed at a normal time, like a normal day shift time, 8, 9 o'clock at night. Sometimes I'll stay up till 10, whatever. But what happens is, for whatever reason, I'll wake up at like 3 or 4 in the morning. And this past week, that happened to me, and man, that was it was a good run. I posted an Instagram reel about it, but it was a challenge. It was so cold out there. And I mean, my upper body was fine. And actually, one of my big complaints about this week, particularly week 4, the footing has been so terrible. But that particular run, the footing was fine. It was just battling the cold. And yeah, so I'm going to talk a little bit more about that particular run in our main topic, because I'm going to share, for our main topic, I want to talk about panic on long runs, or panic in general when you're running, and some of the instances where I've found myself panicking, like genuinely concerned that something might be wrong. In my case, nothing has ever come of it, but Man, last Saturday, 8 miles, -4 degrees. It was the coldest run I've ever done, and it was intense. I'm glad I completed it. My beard was like iced over, completely frozen. It was brutal. So Sunday was a day off. Monday started week 4 of marathon training, and just as a reminder, I am training for the Buffalo Marathon, which is in May, end of May this year. I think it's Memorial Day weekend. I have it on the wall over here. So I'm in week 4 of a 20-week training block, and this week was it was one of those weeks where I couldn't seem to nail down my plan. Like I have a pretty rigid plan. I don't know if the camera can see it, but I plan out my weeks. This is my running schedule here on a laminate thing. So I've got my runs planned out. Like I have a pretty good strategy for these runs and what I want to do every day. And some weeks, man, I just tick off one after another run. I just knock them out of the park. And then there were weeks like this where I wasn't real motivated to run. There's sort of like the Saturday run. I felt so accomplished that I was able to do that run that I kind of felt like I owed myself a break. But that mentality just persists. It just keeps creeping in. And I'll explain what I mean. So Sunday I had no run at all. And I was also dealing with some right side glute pain this week too, and that was another excuse that emerged. But Monday, so I had Sunday as a rest day, but it's also the day that I switched my shift back to third shift and I go to work that night. So Mondays I'm usually pretty out of it. But I did go out on Monday. I got my run in. It was 6 miles and I think it was 8 degrees and it was windy. And I'm telling you, the -4 degrees, the mental challenge in that run was more difficult than this one, but this one felt way colder because of the wind. And I have this dumb theory, and every once in a while I kind of like confirm it to myself, that like anywhere from like 10 degrees to 30 degrees is oftentimes feels colder to me than -4. And the reason is it's almost like at -4, at least around here, there's no real air movement. And so it's just cold and it feels frigid, it feels brisk. But man, when the temperature gets ramped up from -4 to, in this case it was 8 degrees, and when that wind is blowing on your face, it's like it feels 10 times worse. And I'm not one of these guys who looks at the real feel. I don't really know how they figure that. But I'm telling you, my Monday run, that was 6 miles. There was really no pace necessary involved. I was just trying to get 6 miles in. And man, with that windy 8-degree weather, it was brutal. And so you had the 8 miles on Saturday, the real cold feeling, windy 8 degrees on Monday. And man, that's when things started to fall off the rails. So Tuesday I was supposed to do, I think it was 5 to 6 miles, and it was a structured plan. And I was sort of in that zone where I was waiting for my kids to go to school. They all left for school. I had breakfast and I was just sort of like kind of zoning out, falling asleep, watching a show on YouTube, and just kind of like not really wanting to go. And I finally worked myself up to go on my Tuesday run. And I get a text from my daughter. Can you bring my backpack? I forgot my backpack. And I'm like frustrated because here I am. I kind of forced myself to go on this run. And I mean, I was gearing up. I was getting the shoes on. I was going through my mental steps of, get the water ready and just, what clothes am I going to wear? And she needed me to drive her backpack to her. And I'm like, ugh. And it's a stupid small thing that was enough to throw me off completely. So I came home and I abandoned the whole run. Oh, that day too. So Monday, my kids had, I think they had a 2-hour delay. They might have had Monday off. Yeah, they had Monday off, and then Tuesday was a 1-hour delay. So Tuesday, everything was getting pushed later and later. So the later I stay up to do my workout, the later I get to bed. And so here I am on Tuesday. I'm just exhausted. I got my run in on Monday, but it cost me from a rest standpoint. And I'm like, you know what? I'll make it up tomorrow. Wednesday is usually my mobility and stretching day. So I thought I'm just going to take it easy on Tuesday. And then Wednesday, I'll make up for this run. Well, Wednesday rolls around and I'm just not feeling it. And my wife works kind of like a midday shift. Like some days she goes in at like 10, some days she goes in at like 11 or 12. So it's not really a second shift. It's part-time. So it's like the middle of the day. And I usually get my workouts in, and I do this podcast and do all these things when she's asleep so it doesn't bother her or disrupt her, and it's just my thing to do. For whatever reason, she went to bed early on Tuesday night, woke up at 8 o'clock in the morning, which is right when I'm getting ready to gear up. And I always feel kind of bad when she's actually awake at that time. I don't really want to just head out and go on a 6-7 mile run. And in my head, the excuses are piling up. Well, I did 8 miles on Saturday. I did 6 miles. I can push it back another day. And then I started looking at my schedules, and I'm like, what did I get myself into? So yesterday, I was trying to balance this out because I'll be honest, I don't mind doing the cold runs, but I'm getting tired of running in this like 2-inch. So after they plow here, there's like these 2 inches of, the only thing I can describe it as is sand. But it's like, it's snow that when you step on it, it sinks about 1.5 to 2 inches, and then your shoe slides back. So it's not like you're not getting any grip, and you're just sort of like, I don't know how to explain it. It's just so frustrating because it uses different it uses different muscles, and it's not even like you're slipping. It's not even like ice. It's just you're trudging. And I'm sure one of the reasons I like doing it is I think it's building some muscles that will come in handy down the road. But it's getting frustrating because, a lot of my plans for my runs are like, do 6 miles with an average pace of 10 minutes. You're not going to do that in this terrain. You're just not going to do it. If you try to run fast, you're going to use so much energy just trying to push through that. And none of that's real world relevant, because when I get to the Buffalo Marathon, more than likely there won't be any, it's just going to be road running. Now, if I was training to be a trail runner or do an ultra marathon on a trail, this would be great. I'd be building, muscles for that. But I also wouldn't have the paces set so high for my training. So it's just been getting frustrating. So with her being up that early and me not really wanting to go, I just sort of said, push it to Thursday. And then I started doing the math, and I'm like, okay, I got a lot to take care of for me to hit my mileage goal this week. And so I had to make up 2 days worth of running in one day. So what I did yesterday was I got 5.5 miles outdoors. I can't remember. I think it was 5 degrees. So I did 5.5 miles outdoors, and then I literally came in, I got changed, switched my shirt out, and that might sound stupid, but I was drenched after the outdoor 5.5. So then I come down here into my basement, and I hop on the treadmill, and I bang out another basically 3.5 for a total of 8.9 miles yesterday. So not doing anything today. I'm just going to rest. And then tomorrow, my long run for Saturday this week is I'm going to hopefully get 12, but I really enjoyed splitting it between like outdoor running and then coming in here and doing some speed work on the treadmill. And I really feel like that challenges me in a way that will be somewhat relevant to running the marathon, because towards the end of the marathon, when you're trying to go fast, you will have expended a lot of energy. And I know I'm spending a lot of energy not going very fast, but using my muscles. It's almost like running uphill the whole outdoor run for the most part. So I think what I'll do tomorrow is I think I'm going to do like 6 and 6, or if I'm really feeling good out on the outdoor run, maybe I'll do 8 and 4. But my goal is to do 12 tomorrow, and not really. My long runs at this point in the training block are really just to get distance. So there's no. I think my goal is 11 to 12 minute paces. So there's no real stress on the timing. It's just get out there and log those miles. So whether I do them outside or inside, it's not going to make a difference. So that's the plan. That's my weekly update. That kind of covers everything. Let's see. Oh, yeah. So I've been debating whether or not to talk about this. And it's sort of like the low-hanging fruit for podcasts right now to talk about politics and what's going on in the world. I don't really feel like I have anything to offer this conversation specifically, but I also feel like I do have some opinions that aren't being shared. or at least I'm not seeing them in the news media or the podcasts that I listen to. So I did want to share some thoughts on what's been going on in Minneapolis. We've had two police shooting deaths where police, we'll say ICE, federal agents, whatever, have, for all intents and purposes, they've taken the lives of American citizens. And there's all kinds of debate right now as to who's at fault and the background of it. And, oh, well, these are people who are trying to stop them. Was it legitimate for these shootings to happen? All those debates are already being had. I'm not going to offer anything additional to that. What I do want to share are some of my thoughts in general that I don't think are being represented, or I don't think that when you have two sides talking about this thing, there's something that, listen, I'm 42. I've lived through a lot of ups and downs in politics. I've lived through Democrats in charge, Republicans in charge, back and forth and back and forth. And there's a lot of repetition, a lot of things that I see over and over. And I wanted to highlight some of the things that I think average Americans should really think about before they engage themselves intellectually or emotionally in this conversation. And the first one is, it seems like when the people who are talking about this are discussing these whether you're on the side of the person who got shot, or you're on the side of the federal government who was doing the shooting, and you'll notice here in a minute that I'm being very specific in how I phrase this, there's a striking inability for people to separate methods from madness. And I'm reading these right from my notes because it's the idea of the federal government using force the way that it's using it is uncomfortable to me. I find it repulsive, but not because they are deporting people, right? And so this aggression that I'm seeing from these police officers, I've seen it for a long time, and I don't think it's unique to the agency. What I find is that it seems like it is unique to certain individuals, or maybe a handful of individuals that happen to be grouped together, and the environment is creating the excuse, maybe, or the reason to justify that individual or those individuals' desire to explode the way that they are. And listen, this idea that someone fears for their life and they can then discharge a weapon on another person, I get it. It's a valid reason. It's justifiable, right? It's legal, right? Is it right? That's for whoever to decide. We don't know how afraid a person is. We don't know how justified a person feels. But what I do know is I would prefer people who are in police, federal government forces, who are carrying weapons to protect the peace officers, as they're often called, by the people who are on their side even, which is interesting. I would prefer them to have the longer patience level and not be the ones who are doing what they're doing in this case. And I've seen way too many examples, and I'm not even talking about these last two incidences that we've seen in Minneapolis. I'm talking about for decades now of federal or police force. I won't even say federal because I've seen it at the state level, I've seen it at the local level, of people who are in law enforcement in general. There are just too many examples of those individuals using their power to bully other people. Justified or not, that's what they're doing. And when I say justified or not, you might say, oh, well, sometimes there's a need to use force. I'm talking about these instances where the amount of force that was used appears to be unnecessary. Now, what I think I want to do as I talk about this is I actually want to remove the shootings from the conversation because everyone has an opinion on the shootings, right? I want to hone in on something I see all the time. And I'm even going to use an example from the past, but something I see all the time that police do, and maybe it's a tactic they shouldn't use. Like maybe it's not a good idea, right? So first of all, when you watch the most recent shooting, I don't know the names of the people. I'm not that invested in these news stories. But the most recent one, where the gentleman had the firearm in his back, in his belt on his back, and they took it and they shot him. He had a gun. Were they justified? I don't know. But what wasn't justified? Moments before he gets shot was this push on this woman. Now, I'm not leveraging the fact that she's a woman. The amount of force that the officer used to shove that woman that he ultimately was trying to help, and then he got in the middle of it. Should he have? I don't know. Whatever. It is what it is. It's arguing back and forth. There's going to be 1,000 podcasts on that. I don't see a justification for the use of force just with the hands shoving that woman to the ground. It just made no sense to me. And I hone in on that because that is an act of aggression that you might say, oh, wind back the tape a little bit and you'll see what happened. Listen, the gentleman that ended up getting, unfortunately, shot and killed had a weapon. You can come up with an argument to justify his shooting and say, oh, it's unfortunate, but this, that, and the other thing, and here's the reason why, and you can pick a side. Fine, whatever. I would love to hear the justification of what happened right before that, where you full force, double arm, lean into, shove a person. Now, going to back a couple of weeks to the prior shooting where the woman was in her car. The thing that stands out to me is not that she tries to pull away, but what happens moments before that when the police officer who was by her door aggressively yanks on her door handle. And it's an interesting image because it's like, what are you doing? Now you say, oh, it was justified. She was blocking them. She was belligerent. They needed to arrest her. She wasn't obeying orders. Like, bro, like, what are we doing? Like, chill out. What are we doing? And what I see in both of those instances is the escalating act from the people who are supposed to be the ones de-escalating. And you're going to hear that a lot. Some people don't like that. But I look at it and I go, if the roles were reversed, then escalation would be justified. And listen, if you come up to my door and you yank on it the way that police officer did, or if you go up to somebody in front of me and full two-arm push somebody the way that police officer did, I can't, in my mind, go, yeah, I can see that. Now, I have seen videos, clips. A lot of these clips, you don't know when they're from, but they resurface whenever one of these situations happen. I saw one of these clips where a person was standing in front of the vehicle and the officer gets out and shoves her out of the way. That one, I kind of was like, okay, she's impeding the traffic. And so I can kind of understand why he wanted her out of the way. He was frustrated. Kind of understand the logic there. But in this case, it was totally unnecessary. And it made me hearken back to back when, during COVID, when there were, I don't know if they were George Floyd riots or what the riots were for that, at that point in time for that administration, what political thing was going on at the time. But I'm from Western New York, and there was an incident in Buffalo. I looked it up last night where I think the guy was 75 years old. And they were full body, full face mask, not covered faces. I'll get to that in a minute, but they just pushed this 75-year-old guy over, and he kind of stumbles over himself, but he was kind of standing his own ground, and he gets shoved over, and he falls completely. His head hits the ground, and he falls completely unconscious. And one of the people, I don't remember where this was. I don't know if they were federal agents. I don't remember who the police force was in this situation, but one of the gentlemen bent down to help him and another one grabbed him and was like, don't help him. Like, we got to keep doing this. And I'm like, why? Like, he didn't do anything, right? There was no threat involved. In any of these three scenarios that I just explained, there was no threat. Now, you can argue that when the woman in the car mashed the gas, the officer who was standing in front of the vehicle, yeah, he might have feared for his life. Okay, maybe don't stand in front of a vehicle. I'm just saying. I think somebody said that he was not too long earlier almost hit by a vehicle. Maybe not stand in front of vehicles. I don't know. My thought. And then you might say, well, how are they supposed to arrest her if they don't stop the vehicle? Well, I don't know. I don't think they're there to arrest citizens. Maybe take down her license plate and give that to local PD and have them handle it. You know, maybe that would have been a better process. And you might say, oh, well, local PD won't handle it. That's not my understanding of what ICE is there to do. Focus on your task at hand. And it just seems like it's getting escalated to a point where these people are using an amount of force that is unnecessary. And then as that force is used, right, the situation escalates to a point where they then get the justification to do the things that they're doing. And those people who support them come alongside and go, yep, see, oh, these people are out of control and, you know, you shouldn't be there. You should be in your house. You shouldn't be carrying a weapon like at a protest. Well, okay, that's not how the Second Amendment works, but okay, sure. But yeah, there's like a striking inability, I want to get back to my point, of people to separate method from madness. And so what I'm saying here is that what I've seen over the last 20 years is I've seen that both Democrats, both sides, Democrats, Republicans, left, right, conservative, what liberal, whatever you want, what terms you want to use for the sides, right, for the extreme sides, they will justify their actions for their purpose no matter what. And so rather than being against this use of force, they are only against this method when it doesn't suit their madness. Okay? So if taking away your Second Amendment rights is something that the right is firmly against, somehow, magically, all of a sudden, if given the right circumstances that match their madness, they'll justify it. They'll stand right up in front of you and read from the prompter, verbatim, word for word, like, oh, well, this is one of those extreme situations. Okay. And so where I find myself politically is not left or right, but opposed to the use of this force, right? I'm opposed to these officers shoving people with all their might. That doesn't seem like a de-escalation tactic. It doesn't seem like something that's used to control the situation. In any case, in any reason, right? Whether we're talking about COVID riots or George Floyd riots or ICE riots, that's not an appropriate use of force, in my opinion. And so I don't care what the reason is, you shouldn't be doing that. That's just my logical conclusion. And that ends up putting me in a weird spot because when this method is being used by the left thinks I'm on the right because I'm opposed to it. And then when the right is doing this, the right thinks I'm on the left because I'm opposed to this method, this use of force. And that's why I end up falling independent or libertarian, because I do not like the government doing these types of things, using this level of force. And one thing that does scare me quite a bit is I've seen over the last 20 years where one side will use a method of force, an amount of force, and justify it. And meanwhile, this side who's not in power will say, well, you can't do that, you can't do that, you can't do that. And then the power structure will flip and they will say, well, you did that when you were fighting your cause, so now I'm going to take it one step higher. I'm going to increase the amount of violence. I'm going to increase the amount of force. I'm going to step on your rights. And then this side goes, well, I thought you said we couldn't do that, right? Because they're not in power. And then they get back in power. And they go, well, because you did that, now we're going to do this. And they say, you can't do that. You can't do that. That's a violation of my rights. And it just keeps going. And the whole time it's escalating and escalating and escalating. And it's like, if we could just get people to agree on separating the method from the madness, right? Like, regardless of your position, we don't do this thing, right? Regardless of whether it's for the right reasons, this is not appropriate behavior from our law enforcement officials. Like, can we get there? I mean, when I look at that most recent shooting, I watched in probably the span of 3 minutes. I don't know. I should go back and time it and figure it out. But a federal agent who's completely lost control. He's not doing anything with any sort of control. Full force shove a woman to the ground. Immediately pull out his pepper spray and spray multiple people without discretion. He's not like, as far as I could tell, the guy who ended up getting shot was just trying to block his own eyes, and he was reacting to the pepper spray. That's my read on the situation. Maybe he was trying to attack the agent. I didn't see it that way, but that's apparently a way people can perceive it. And then I saw 6, I think it was 6 men wrestle this guy to the ground. And one thing that I've only seen referenced in a couple of videos is one of the agents just gives up on the pepper spray and just starts bludgeoning him repeatedly over the head with the pepper spray gun. And I'm like, none of that, right? None of that is appropriate behavior. It's not necessary. You have 6 people involved. When it's 6 on 1, you don't really need a weapon. Now, if he had pulled his gun out and was threatening them in that way, they didn't even realize all these things happened prior to them even realizing he was carrying a gun. So all of those uses of force escalated the situation, in my opinion. And the people who were doing that were agents of law, peace officers. I don't think that's appropriate. I don't care if the issue is COVID. I don't care if the issue is race. I don't care if the issue's, in this case, deportation. I don't care. That just doesn't seem appropriate for officials who are supposed to be enforcing law. It just doesn't seem right to me. The second thing, I got to get quicker on this because we're going to waste a lot of time and we won't have much time for our main topic. So the first thing is a striking inability to separate method from madness, to say, no matter what, this is not appropriate. This action is not appropriate. We seem to have lost that. The second thing is an inability to empathize with our opposition. People just don't seem to be able to step outside of themselves and take the position of their opposition. And it's funny because, I shouldn't say funny, but it's interesting because I've been watching now, like I said, for 20 years. I'm 42, 22 years, whatever, however long I've been watching both sides do the exact same things for different reasons. And listen, if you believed what your fellow American who you disagree with believed as passionate as they believed it, you would understand what they're doing. You would, like, oh, well, like this is my favorite one. You wouldn't be bringing a gun to a protest that's just not appropriate. And yet, during COVID, you had people on the right who were Trump supporters. I think Trump even supported, who stormed the Michigan Capitol, and they were full-on brandishing. I don't know what they were. Probably the news called it AR-15s or whatever. But they had, like, there was a group that literally, like, stormed the Capitol, and none of them got shot. And I'm not saying they should get shot because, again, that's a method that should be separated from the madness. But the right was supporting it because they felt that the reason, right, justified their use of force in that case for people to carry their weapons in that protest. And it's like, if you could just for a moment put yourself in their shoes, you might understand why they're doing what they're doing, blowing whistles and trying to go, like, the inability to at least understand their concern. You don't have to agree with them, but you could at least put yourself in their shoes. And it just seems like we're unable to empathize with their position. And all you would really have to do is, in this particular case, is put an ICE vest or an ICE uniform on the people who are being shot in your mind, mentally. So What's interesting is I don't know if this is AI or not. I see people saying it's AI, but there was a video that came out that supposedly was like 10 days earlier of the individual who was shot kicking a Ford Expedition, knocking the taillight off, just being completely insane, right? Just yelling, spitting, kicking, whatever. And I guess the theory is that because of this happened, then this justified what happened later. Total misnomer. I don't think that's true. Again, I don't think even then he did anything that would have justified the use of force. I still think that if he did something illegal, they should have arrested him. Like, he broke that vehicle if that was a real video, okay? But what I thought was interesting was in that video, everybody's saying, see, this is not a peaceful man. Interesting. So you're telling me that charging someone's vehicle, kicking it, and doing that is showing that you're not peaceful. Well, what are the ICE agents doing when they are grabbing this woman's car and standing in front of it? Like, how do we not understand this dynamic, and how do we come to the defense of one or the other? Like, I sit there and look outside of it and go, roles reversed. Like, I'm surprised the left hasn't done this, but said, oh, didn't you see that ICE agent almost run him over with his car? Right? Like, that's how ridiculous this is. It's like, or another thing you don't see is like, so they show that video clip, right? It's kind of like proof that he was, I guess it was okay to shoot him. I don't know. It's absurd. But it's like, oh, well, we don't know. This is how the right would act if he was wearing an ice vest. Well, we don't know what happened leading up to that. We need to see what happened before that. He could have been, they could have been yelling at him, or maybe they were violent towards him before that. So let's back the tape up. Well, then the next thing is, well, let's back the tape up a little further and back the tape up a little further. It's like, yeah, how about let's not do those things, okay? He should not be kicking their Ford Expedition. They should not be yanking on her door, and they should not be full force pushing. Like, if we get to this place where we can understand that we separate the method from the madness and we empathize with our opposition and say, hey, I understand why you're upset, but this behavior does not correlate. It seems like things calm down. That's my thought on it. So a striking inability to separate method from madness, inability to empathize with opposition. And the last thing I wanted to point out was I've noticed an inability to identify propaganda talking points. This is probably the worst to me. Now, I know I shouldn't say it's the worst. People losing their life is the worst, obviously. But watching Kristi Noem and I think the guy who was the head, I think he got demoted, the head of ICE or whatever, standing up there and telling the story of what happened in this most recent shooting. And it's literally word for word the same. Like, he was there to do the most amount of damage. It was a weird thing, but it was word for word the same. And it was no different. This is probably going to offend some people. I don't care. It was no different than watching Dr. Fauci lie to the American people on CNN or Fox News. Listen, I don't care what political party you're affiliated with. That should annoy you. That should annoy you that they think you're that stupid. That they can sit there and read a prompter that they've both clearly written and said, okay, this is what we're going to give to them. And then they defend it, and they have all these like dodgy ways of answering questions rather than just saying, hey, we think a couple of these agents screwed up and we're going to deal with them. Why is that not an option? Why does that not even appear as an option? Is it like, oh, if we admit one agent got a little rogue, then the whole administration failed? Like, I don't get it. It's like an all or nothing mentality, and it doesn't need to be, right? So this inability of people to identify propaganda, particularly when you agree with the propaganda, and that's really disturbing to me, because people who were supportive of the COVID protocols and were concerned with what was going on with COVID, they would eat that stuff up. Fauci would get up there and say, oh, 6 feet, masks, the shot works, all these things, right? Maybe I'm a conspiracy theorist. I don't know. What I do know is I know what propaganda looks like. And Fauci and Noem and Bovee, it's all the same. They're just reading talking points. And whenever they've constructed those talking points, it's propaganda. They're trying to hide something. They're trying to quell something. They're trying to win maybe some political points somewhere. It's listening to that from both of those two individuals was just, it's one of the things that's most refreshing about Trump. Now, I'm not a big Trump supporter. I'm not a Trump supporter at all. But he doesn't do that. You don't write him a script and he reads it. He can't help himself. And that's somewhat refreshing. It's also something I like about Robert Kennedy, is he's not tied to a script. Like he can freewheel and say what's on his mind and reason actively as a situation is evolving. He can be right in that moment. That whole them reading that, staring at the camera, face on, staring at it and going blah 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 blah. It was like, that's propaganda. And to not be aware of that and go and have your radar perk up and go, this is something, whether you're on the right or the left, you should be able to look at that and go, I don't know about that. Like I don't know about that. Like when Fauci did it, when Noam did it, when this bovine guy or bovine, I don't know how you say his name. All of those situations, when they start regurgitating that stuff word for word, identical, you should be going, I don't know about this situation. It should make you very uncomfortable. So those are just my thoughts on the ICE raids. I guess I should have in the shootings that happened recently. I don't provide any extra thought process to the conversation at all. I just thought that those are some of the things that I've noticed as I've been watching the news and podcasts and stuff. I will say, if you want my take on the actual shootings, I thought Dave Smith on the podcast Part of the Problem did a really good job in his last couple episodes talking about it. So that kind of agreed with him on most of what he had to say. Our main topic today was panic on long runs and pain management. And I wanted to talk, this kind of goes along with my articles on the Substack, uncredible.me, where I was kind of thinking through some of the excuses that I've dealt with on my longer runs. And I actually encountered this, I call it panic, because I think that's the right word, on my 4-degree Saturday run last week. I went out really early. It was pitch black dark. And I remember right when I set out, I felt good. The footing was surprisingly decent. So I was like, oh, I'm not going to fall today. This won't be too bad. I just have to manage the cold. So I'm out there running. And I got about 2 miles in, and I remember thinking to myself, it wouldn't be a bad idea to stay close to home in case the cold starts to get to me in a way that I need to get back home quickly. And the route that I take on my runs it takes me about 4 miles away from my house as I curve around. I go down some side streets and whatnot. And as I got through the first 2.5 miles, I was feeling good. And I ended up in this area where there's no street lights. It's kind of a rural area. You leave the city and you go down this road where you start heading into more of a rural area. And it turned pitch black. I mean, pitch black dark. And so I'm running, and at first I thought, well, this is nice. It's nice. I'm a night shifter. This feels good. And then I saw something I've never seen before. Now, out here, there's a lot of deer population, so it's not uncommon to see deer running around. But what I saw was, and typically when you see deer, they will stop and stare at you, and then they'll kind of trot off, or if you scare them, they'll jump a little bit and then they'll stop. Typically, they're with 2 or 3 of them together. And as I'm running up and getting close to mile 3, there's actually a loop around mile 3 around this little cul-de-sac, or I don't know what you call it, but a handful of homes. It's like maybe a 1/4 mile to run this little loop. It just adds a little more to the run. And just before I got to that loop, a deer, full bore, ran across the street and kind of startled me. Now, I probably shouldn't, but I run with earbuds in, so I don't really hear things, but I heard this thing stomping through. Now, it was just me and this deer, so there's no cars. It was like 4, 5 in the morning. And it startled me, and it got me thinking all of a sudden about all the things that could go wrong on this run. I'm far from home. Like at this point, I'm probably about 2.5, 3 miles away from my home. And I was like, man, if something happens, I'm in trouble. And it wasn't the fact that the deer scared me that really got me going down this path. What it was the fact that that this deer was running. The way that he was running, I was like, man, in my head, I created this whole story about how this deer was affected by the cold and he's acting differently. And maybe he's cold and maybe I shouldn't be out here. And so I'm running and I'm trying to like quell these thoughts in my head. And I'm starting to panic a little bit, thinking about, boy, man, my legs are getting cold. You know, are they numb? Like, are they really cold? And I don't realize how cold they are, because I did make the mistake. I wore good layers on my upper torso, but on my lower body, I did not wear anything extra special. I just had some really loose athletic pants. And so I'm running around this loop, and I get around this quarter-mile loop, and another one of these deer just goes darting past me and like full sprint. Now, I'm telling you, I've lived in this area most of my life. I mean, I left for like maybe 10 years, but then we ended up moving back here later in life, and I've never seen this before. Like, where they're full sprint alone just in the dark. And all of a sudden, the combination of all these thoughts, I'm cold. The other thing that got me was this is dumb. Instead of bringing my water bottles, I've been having a problem with these little soft water bottles, the nozzles freezing on me. So I wore my it's called a bladder, my 3-liter water bladder, but I only filled it like a little bit. And for some reason, I thought that would freeze less, but it froze like a mile in. So I didn't have any water either. And so that, coupled with the darkness, coupled with this deer running around, together with, man, I've never ran in -4 degrees. This is the coldest run I've ever had. Maybe I shouldn't be out here that long, you know? So all these thoughts are going through my head, and I could tell that I was full on in panic mode. Like, what happens in the dark if I collapse? Right? So these are the thoughts that are going through my head as I get to the end of this loop. And at the end of this loop, I have the option to turn left and start heading back home and say, hey, you know what? I know today's a long run Saturday and I'm supposed to do 8 miles, but after all, it is -4 degrees and it's the coldest run I've ever done. And if I get too far away from home and something happens, I'm going to be in trouble. So all these things are going through my head. And I kind of like have to calm myself down. And in order to do that, I'm going to share with you some of these strategies for overcoming this panic that sets in when you're running or when you're doing anything in life. But I've noticed that I can actually map it out when I'm running. The first thing that I do is I breathe. I just focus on my breathing, taking deep breaths. Typically, I'll try to hydrate, but that was one of the things that was throwing me off, is the fact that I didn't have the ability to hydrate. But I wasn't that bad off. I was warm from my torso up. My legs were good. They were cold, and they stung a little bit from the cold. But overall, I was doing fine. The footing was good. There was really very little that was wrong with this run. So I just started to think rationally and say, okay, well, if something happens, I have my phone. I can just call somebody. Yes, it's cold, but never once in over a year now, or almost a year now of running long distances, have I ever been in a situation where I couldn't keep going. Well, that's not true. I'll share one here in a minute. But I was able to, like where I fell on the ground and couldn't keep going in that regard. So I was just think rationally, breathe, and hydrate and take it easy. Slow your pace down. And I finally made the decision to turn right and kept going. And the run was fine. I ended up okay. But in that moment, I got to thinking to myself, man, those panic moments happen in life, whether it's when you have a job change, when you have a major, something happens at work and it feels like you're going to lose your job, or maybe something in your relationship goes haywire and you start to panic like things are spiraling out of control. You have to learn techniques and tactics to overcome that in your mind. And the more often you do that, the stronger you become mentally to go to the next level. Another time I panicked this was the exact opposite scenario. This was when I was training for my first half marathon last year in, I think it was June or July. I had laid out this like 20-mile route that I wanted to complete. And I failed time and again. And the first time that I failed this run, I had run, I think I was 8, maybe I was 11 miles into this run. And I was having trouble choking down this protein bar that I thought was a great idea. And so I ended up, the heat was getting to me, and I ended up drinking and drinking and drinking, trying to wash this thing down. And I finally got it, but then I realized that I was completely out of water. And I was like 13 miles in. And to get home, I think I had to go about 18 miles. And then I had the option to go a little bit further if I wanted to chase 22 miles that day. That wasn't going to happen. But here I am, like 13, 14 miles in, no water, and I'm trying to push through, and I'm using these tactics where it's like, think rationally, breathe, it's not that bad. And all of a sudden, my hamstring starts to pull a little bit, and I'm like, okay. So we stretch that out, no big deal. Things loosen up, I start running again, and then my quad just starts flexing, like doing one of these, right? And I instinctually, because I had never had quad problems up to this point, I instinctually reached down to do a quad stretch, and I pulled it up, and immediately, this is the dumbest thing ever, immediately my hamstring just went, like just tightened up, and so I had to straighten my leg right out, and then by straightening the leg out to relieve the hamstring, the quad flexed again, and I'm just like sitting there like limping in this weird position down one of the highway routes that we have here locally. I'm like limping down this highway, and I'm like, I'm not gonna make it. I start panicking. I'm like, what do I do? What if I pulled a muscle? I've never pulled a muscle before. I don't even know what that feels like. Maybe I just did it. Like you start, your mind just starts telling you all these stories. And again, I just breathe. Couldn't hydrate in both of these situations, which may have been what elevated my concern levels. And then I ultimately quit that run because I was panicking. In that case, I didn't overcome it. But that got me to the place where I could take the next step the next time I ran it. And when I felt these pains and these issues in my legs, I could say, okay, just keep going. Slow your pace. Just keep going. Slow your pace. Keep going. What I learned is that as long as you breathe, one, think rationally, don't think about the worst case scenario. Think what's likely going to happen, right? Don't try to leap to I'm dying, or I pulled a muscle, or my leg's gone, or I could be injured for life. Try to rein that in. And then for me, I think I have a tendency not to hydrate when I'm supposed to, and then I start to panic. My body starts to have these mental triggers that if I had just been hydrating, I probably wouldn't even feel that way. So those are just some tips that I threw out there, and I thought it was a good main topic because a lot of times in life, you get to these places where you panic. And running for me, and it might be, for you, it might be weightlifting, but running for me has given me the ability to sort of simulate that feeling and face it head on. I don't want to go on this run. I'm too sore. I'm too tired. I don't think I can do it. And then I start to do it and I overcome that. Or, man, I'm 4 miles in. It's too cold. I can't handle this. I'm not going to make it. What if I fall over and die? What if I have a heart attack? Right? You just keep pushing forward. Slow down. Breathe. Focus. Think rationally. Drink some water. It'll be okay. That is very relevant to when life goes sideways on you. It's very powerful to be able to, in your mind, say mentally, I've been here before. It's not the end of the world. Let's just take a moment and breathe and think logically and rationally and get through this on to the next thing. You won't always overcome. Sometimes you'll fail, but even in the failure, you get I've noticed this almost every time. Even in the failure, you get to that point, you stop, right? You don't overcome. You fold, like almost instantly. Once the pressures are relieved, whether it's you get home and you cut your run short, or you, in my case for that run where I was in the heat and I called for help, the second I hung up the phone, all of a sudden I can run just fine again. And you go, oh, a lot of this was in my head. So I just wanted to share that with you. We are going long today, but we'll wrap it up here pretty soon. Actually, about the same as last week, now that I look at the time. Let's look at our podcast feature this week, and this was a fun one. It's probably not going to appeal to everybody. If you're a homeschool parent, I think this podcast would be good for you. I really do. This took me back to when I was homeschooling my kids. The podcast is called Raising Canes, and it's raising just spelled like raising, but then the word canes is Kanes. I'm from the Northeast. I did not realize that there is a restaurant called Raising Canes. So when you're searching for this, good luck. I'll link it in the podcast notes. But I don't even know how I came across this. Probably on Instagram. I was probably scrolling. But what drew me in was I saw an ad for this podcast, and it was their episode 17 was called Remembering Nintendo. And the ad kind of showed that he was going to go through the history of Nintendo and the Sega Wars and all that with his children. And I thought that'd be fun to listen to on a long run. And I actually listened to this on that 8-mile run I've been talking about this whole episode. And I'll be honest, I grew up in the 80s and 90s. There was not a whole lot of new information to me from this. It was fun to see his kids kind of be introduced to the history of the gaming that they're now involved with today. You know, the kids were just so excited about the Nintendo Switch that he couldn't get a word in edgewise. Every time he asked them a question, like, hey, do you know what came next? And they're like, the Switch. So this episode did not really capture me, but it's a fun, if you're not familiar with the history of Nintendo or your kids aren't, great episode, fun episode. Then because I was so cold, I didn't want to change to music and I didn't want to switch podcasts. I didn't want to do anything. So I just left my phone alone. I'm doing this because I keep my phone in my back, in my belt, which I keep on my back. The podcast, Spotify rotated back to episode 1 on the American Revolution. And I immediately got roped in. And it was clear to me that, kind of like I'm doing right now, that they took the podcast too long. The episode went way longer than they had planned. There's some great moments where, I don't know how old this guy's kids are, but you can hear them yawning in the episode like he's getting boring. And it's neat that he did not remove that. It's just so refreshing and it's so real. But man, in light of the things that have been going on lately, this is a really good episode on liberty, the American Revolution, Boston Tea Party, Declaration of Independence. There's a really neat, I highly encourage you, if you don't even listen to this podcast regularly from this point forward, I highly encourage you to just go listen to episode 1 on the American Revolution, Raising Canes, Kanes. He has his son read the Declaration of Independence. It's right around the 16-minute mark. I'll tell you, I happened to be reading this just after I heard about the shooting, and I was like, I'm listening to him read it, and I'm just thinking to myself, it was pretty heavy. It's pretty heavy when you think about what we fought for in the Revolution, the American Revolution, and what's happening right now in our country. It's pretty wild to just hear that document read unfiltered, really without bias from a child. And it was really cool. I don't think he reads the whole thing. I think he just reads a part of it. But they put some decent music, Revolutionary War music to it. It's a really good podcast. But again, if you're a homeschool parent, it kind of seemed like he was using the podcast as a medium to teach his kids, which is kind of cool. But you could also teach your kids with this podcast. So if you're a homeschool parent doing American Revolution stuff, or I didn't scroll through all of his episodes. He's got 18 now. I think another one came out since I listened to the Nintendo one. But if you're teaching your kids history, they could listen to this you could listen to it together and really enjoy that educational process. And the kids could relate to the kids. And as a parent, you might understand where your kids are coming from and what their perspective on it is. So I thought it was really cool. So check that out, Raising Canes. I found it on Spotify. I did have a difficult time trying to find it when I Google searched it because of the restaurant chain. So maybe it'll be easier to look up if you just go to Spotify and search for it. But Raising Canes, I'll put links in the show notes. And then we'll close things out with our quote of the week. And I forgot to flip my calendar. There it is. It's funny that this was a zero mileage day, but here we are. Pain today, strength tomorrow. And the reason I wanted to share this quote for today's episode is I've been dealing with a lot of pain this week. Quad pain, adductor pain, glute pain, all of that mostly in my right leg, which has mostly gone away actually. I had those 2 rest days. I seem to be doing a lot better. But pain today, strength tomorrow. And that's true. In order to build strength, you're going to have to endure a little bit of pain today so that you can push through and build strength. However, as much as that is true, it's also not true. And it was sort of a weird week because as I was dealing with this pain, I was wrestling with these thoughts in my head. Should I listen to my body or not? And like when you're trying to push yourself to do things that you've never done before, whether it's run a marathon, run a half marathon, run a 5K, or run those distances at pace, or maybe it's weightlifting, maybe it's weight loss, you're trying to diet. Whenever you do those things, your body does react. And you do have to say, hey, this pain that I'm feeling is good. It's healthy. It's building me up. But then there's another pain, right? There's another pain that's like, hey, you may have pushed this too far. And when you become strong mentally, that's a fine line to walk. You know, when you're out there, when I'm out there in -4 degrees, you're really thinking about whether or not this is really good for your body. Is this healthy? Or am I just hurting myself at this point? It's very important that when you're enduring pain for the purpose of growth, that you try to know the difference between pain that strengthens you and pain that furthers your injury. And part of my training block for this 20 weeks is really learning from the mistakes that I made when I first started running, where I just thought, oh, we'll just keep running. Just run and run and run and run and run. And I fought through IT band knee pain and in both knees, hamstring pain, adductor pain, all these pains. The whole thing that I've done for this 20 weeks is to allow my body time to get stronger, to get faster, and to be able to go longer on these runs. And I've scheduled it out so that as I increase my mileage, there are days off between those mileage increases. So like, for example, this week I have Monday and Tuesday was supposed to be runs, and then Wednesday was a break, strength and mobility. And then Thursday was a run, and then Friday was a break. And then Saturday's a run, and then Sunday's a break. So I'm building in those rests so that my body can adapt to those situations and get stronger. I really think I benefited this week, even though I was kind of frustrated that I missed a couple of my runs on Tuesday and Wednesday, and I had to stack them yesterday. I think it was what was best for me because I was really having a hard time on Monday when I ran. Really digging in and actually getting any kind of pace. Man, my right side was just in a lot of pain. And right now, at this moment, I kind of feel like I could run. My treadmill's right here behind the cameras. You can't see it, so when I point, that's what I'm pointing to. I could get on the treadmill right now and probably run 5 miles, but I know that I'm still recovering from the pain that I had earlier this week. I'm getting stronger from the long run I did yesterday, and I will leverage that tomorrow when I do my long run. Hopefully it'll be a 6 and 6 where I do 6 outside, 6 inside. We'll see. So that'll complete our episode. We went way too long today. I hope the camera kept running. I don't know how long the Pixel 5 can go, but let's close things out. I just want to thank you for listening to the Uncredible Podcast. Remember to subscribe to the Substack at uncredible.me. You'll find everything there, links to the YouTube videos, the articles. The only thing you won't find on the uncredible.me is my daily updates, which I typically throw on Instagram, and I'm trying to get better at posting. They call them notes in Substack, so I'm trying to get better at sharing my daily activities that I post on Instagram on the Substack as well, so that'll be in the notes. So get on uncredible.me, which is basically a forwarding link to Substack. Like and subscribe on YouTube and Spotify. All the links are in the description. For Uncredible merch, I'm not wearing one today. I'm just wearing a Walmart shirt today. For Uncredible merch, check out merch.uncredible.me. You can get shirts, hats, stickers, sweatshirts, all kinds of logos. I think I promised in episode 0 that I would get a shirt out there for the actual podcast logo. I'm still working on that. I'm still trying to get this whole thing sorted out, but I feel like I have a good handle on things. So again, thanks for listening to the podcast, and we'll see you next week. Until then, remain uncredible.